unusually still that day, the kind of quiet that made every small sound sharper, the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock, even the soft rustle of the curtains in the breeze. Life had changed in unexpected ways since his stepmother had moved in. She wasn't just a new presence in the house, she was a shift in the dynamic, an undeniable force. She carried herself with a grace that felt effortless, her elegance drawing attention wherever she went. Though she was closer to his age than his father's, her vibrancy seemed to fill every corner of the home. His father, always busy with work, was gone once again, leaving the two of them alone. It was strange, the way his father entrusted these moments to chance, as if unaware or indifferent to the growing tension between them. His stepmother had taken to her role in the household with ease, her subtle confidence unsettling in ways he couldn't quite define. There were the lingering glances, the soft smiles that seemed meant just for him. Their conversations were brief, but beneath the surface, something unspoken simmered. He told himself it was nothing, just harmless overthinking. But the more he tried to brush it aside, the more he felt its pull. He noticed everything: the faint scent of her perfume, the melodic sound of her laughter, the way her presence seemed to change the energy of the room. There were moments when their gazes met, and it felt as though time stretched, making him hyper-aware of the space, or lack of it, between them. He wanted to believe it was just his imagination. After all, she was his stepmother. But as the days passed, those moments multiplied, the tension growing like an unspoken secret between them. It wasn't something either of them acknowledged aloud, but it was there, undeniable and persistent. One morning, the day began like any other, but something about it felt different, a faint hum of anticipation he couldn't shake. They were alone in the house again, and the quiet magnified every sound, every movement. He tried to focus on mundane tasks, but her presence loomed, filling the air with an almost tangible weight. He retreated to the bathroom, hoping a moment alone would help clear his head. Letting the water run, he leaned against the sink, trying to steady his thoughts. Then came a soft knock at the door, startling him. Her voice called out, calm and composed. "I need something from in there." Confused but curious, he opened the door slightly, expecting her to wait at a distance. Instead, she stood close, too close. The proximity hit him like a wave, and for a moment, he forgot how to breathe. She stepped inside, her movements measured, and as she brushed past him, their hands touched, lightly, briefly, but enough to leave him rooted to the spot. He glanced up, and their eyes met. In that fleeting moment, everything else seemed to fade away. The air between them thickened, heavy with unspoken words and a tension neither of them dared to address. Her gaze lingered, her expression soft yet unreadable, and he felt his heartbeat quicken. Time seemed to slow, stretching the moment into something infinite. The warmth of her presence, the delicate scent she carried, and the faint steam from the running water blurred together, creating a haze of sensory overload. His mind screamed at him to break the silence, to step back, but he remained frozen. Then, just as quickly as it began, she stepped back, the moment shattered. Her cheeks were flushed, and her composure faltered for just a second. "I just needed to grab this," she muttered, her voice quiet, almost unsure. He moved aside, watching her leave the room, her absence as palpable as her presence had been. The door clicked shut behind her, and he stood there, the memory of their brief encounter playing over and over in his mind. The hours that followed felt surreal. Every glance, every brush of hands, every lingering gaze replayed itself with vivid clarity. He tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as nothing, but the pull between them was undeniable. This wasn't just curiosity. It was deeper, something unspoken that hung in the air whenever they were together. The boundaries between them felt blurred, and he couldn't shake the feeling that things would never return to normal. Each passing moment brought them closer to a line neither of them dared to cross. Yet, he couldn't deny it any longer. This wasn't just in his head. It was real, and it was only a matter of time before they both had to face it. The house was cloaked in an unusual stillness that morning, the kind of quiet that felt heavier than silence itself. Every small noise, the gentle hum of the fridge, the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, seemed amplified. Life had shifted in subtle yet profound ways since his stepmother entered it. She wasn't just a new addition to the family, her presence altered the very air in the house, leaving him perpetually unsettled. From the moment she married his father, she had commanded attention in ways he couldn't quite put into words. She was elegant, confident, and impossibly vibrant, qualities that made her seem closer to his age than his father's. Her arrival had redefined what home felt like, and though he tried to treat her like just another member of the family, something about her made that impossible. His father's absences didn't help. Always tied up with work, his dad was gone for most of the day, leaving them alone together more often than not. It wasn't intentional, or at least he didn't think it was, but the arrangement created a dynamic that neither of them seemed able to ignore. She was effortlessly charming, a quality that made every interaction feel loaded with subtext. When she glanced at him, it was never just a glance. Her eyes lingered, as though searching for something unspoken. Her smiles carried a warmth that felt intimate, personal, like they shared a secret no one else could understand. He told himself it was all in his head, a trick of his imagination fueled by proximity. Yet, each passing day made it harder to believe that. He couldn't help but notice the little things, the subtle way she moved, the delicate scent of her perfume lingering in a room long after she left, the soft lilt of her laughter that seemed to echo in his mind. They rarely spoke, but when they did, their conversations felt charged, every word layered with meaning neither dared to acknowledge. And then there were the silences, those stretches of quiet where nothing was said, but everything seemed to be communicated in the space between their glances. It was wrong, and he knew it. But the pull he felt toward her was undeniable, a magnetic force he couldn't seem to resist. She was his stepmother, yet her presence felt far more significant than that title implied. One day, the tension between them reached a breaking point. The morning had started like any other, quiet and unremarkable. He tried to keep himself occupied, burying his thoughts in distractions, but the weight of her presence filled the house, making it impossible to focus. Eventually, he retreated to the bathroom, hoping a few moments of solitude would clear his mind. He turned on the faucet, letting the warm water run as he leaned over the sink, his hands gripping the edges tightly. His reflection stared back at him, but his thoughts were elsewhere on her. A soft knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. He hesitated, unsure if he'd imagined it, but then her voice came, calm and composed. "I need something from inside," she said. For a moment, he debated ignoring her, but something about her tone compelled him to open the door. He cracked it just enough to peek out, but she was closer than he'd anticipated. The sudden proximity caught him off guard, and he felt his breath hitch. Her expression was serene, as if she were completely unaware of the effect she had on him. "Sorry to bother you," she said, her voice soft. "I just need to grab something." He stepped aside, his movements stiff and awkward. As she brushed past him, their hands accidentally touched briefly, but with enough intensity to send a jolt of electricity through him. He froze, his heart pounding, and when he glanced up, her eyes were on his. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Her gaze was steady, searching, and he felt exposed under its weight. The air between them thickened, charged with an energy that neither of them acknowledged but both of them felt. Her scent filled the small space, mingling with the warmth of the steam, creating an atmosphere that was both intoxicating and overwhelming. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud and insistent, as if urging him to act, to say something, anything. But he didn't move, and neither did she. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken possibilities. It was as if the entire house held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then, she broke the spell, stepping back and muttering a quick excuse. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, her voice quieter now. "I'll let you get back to it." He nodded, his throat too tight to respond. As she left the room, he remained where he was, staring at the empty doorway. The moment replayed itself in his mind, every detail sharper and more vivid with each repetition. He spent the rest of the day in a daze, unable to focus on anything else. The memory of her touch, her scent, the way her eyes lingered, it was all-consuming. No matter how hard he tried to push it away, it kept coming back, stronger each time. He knew he was crossing a line, even if only in his thoughts. But the pull between them was undeniable, a force that seemed to grow stronger with every passing day. The tension had reached a point where it couldn't be ignored, and he couldn't help but wonder how much longer they could pretend it didn't exist. The house felt like a powder keg, each glance, each touch, each unspoken word adding to the pressure. And though he knew it was dangerous, he couldn't help but feel that something inevitable was on the horizon.